not good enough because we have a lot of fun when we get down to it anyway. So I just need to do this more often to get used to the process. But I won't explain what went wrong there. It's too embarrassing. It's too embarrassing. But we'll crack on now. Um, Again, we are with the Dr. Dana Reynolds-Marniche, an expert on the Moors, the Berbers, and as you will find out later in this conversation, also an expert when it comes to the ancient Israelites and the ancient Arabs. I will let the doctor tell us her credentials, but first, I want to. I looked into your bio myself, doctor, and I just want to know what an esteemed uh, uh, amazing intellectual mind like yourself is doing, adding a film such as Coming to America to her to her favorite films of all time. I saw that on your bio. Is that a favorite of yours then, Doctor?
Oh, it's one of them, and also I think might be Eddie Murphy, but Heaven, the other one is Golden Child.
Oh, the Golden. I've not yet seen that. I've
Oh
not
yeah,
yet seen that, but yes, that's one that I have to watch. But Coming to America is a classic. I just thought it was one for the plebs, you know. But
well,
it's
it's
a brilliant
actually
film.
it's actually similar to something that happened to me when I was at Rutgers. So that
Right. Wow.
yeah.
Okay. So there's background story to that. What's your favorite Clint Eastwood movie?
Oh, I love all of them.
You know
Um,
what?
I guess was it High Plains Drifter?
High Plains Drifter. Again,
Yeah,
one I've not seen. I've seen Dirty Harry. I've seen a few of the spaghettis, but I've not seen High Plains Drifter myself. It might surprise you, but I think that's a western as well, isn't it? High Plains Drifter.
yeah, yeah. They're mostly rough.
Yeah, it
Like
is. Yeah, my favorite of his isn't actually a western. It's Gran Torino. It's one of his more recent ones. It's a film called Gran Torino. That's an interesting one. Um, But anyway, let's move on. Let's move on, and let me
I don't,
introduce you to the. Sorry,
I don't
sorry.
like him much anymore because he's very conservative now. So I don't really like him.
Yeah, yeah, he is quite conservative. He did that a few years back. That was a strange one. I'll
Yeah.
just read to the viewers and to everybody who's watching and listening right now. Dr. Dana Reynolds-Marniche is former instructor of world civilizations, anthropology, and sociology courses at Glassboro State College. I don't know if that's present. She might have moved on from that position. Jersey City State College and the College of New Rochelle. She is the former assistant editor of the International Journal of Multicultural Education, museums consultant, and researcher for the Pulitzer nominated book Way of the Earth Encounters with Nature in Ancient and Contemporary Thought, written in 1995. But, Doctor, please come in now and tell us something more about yourself, or what you're currently doing, and anything I've missed out there. I believe you're Columbia University educated as well.
Yeah, Columbia, but mainly University of Chicago has more to do with my background in anthropology and knowing about archaeological and I'd say biological anthropology. So I worked
Mm,
actually. I was actually able to do independent study under the head of American anthropology at the time, and she introduced me to certain texts like those you know of Marie Chamla, Marie Chamla, and so that got me interested in writing about the so-called Mediterranean race, and just seeing how certain distortions came up in Western scholarly writings. So uh, right now, I'm actually working on a few research projects or publications for my Mellon Press. That was the person that um, published the African and Arabian origins of the Hebrew Bible. So he wanted me to do actually four more publications, and the one I'm working on now deals directly with who the Canaanites were and are. So it's from an archaeological perspective and an ethnographic and ethnohistoric perspective. A lot of people don't know that a lot of biblical peoples are still alive under their names. So the Bani Kanana are still located in the Gor or Transjordanian area and in Jericho. Bani Kanana, or the people that came to be known as Canaanites. So that's one thing I'm working on now. Next week I'll be in, or actually this week I'll be in Chicago for a lecture on how Africans in general are, in the West African and North African region at one time were related to people called Canaanites and Israelites. And not those people, though. Those are not, I don't know why. Why do we have Syrians up there?
Okay, very good question. Very, very good question, Doctor. I have I want us to begin right here, and obviously we can all see that you're very perceptive. So I've put this up on the screen, and if you are in the chat, if you're watching this right now, you want to click onto the tab of this discussion. I'm going to ask you, Doctor, is this a more? Is this a more? And I've got my reasons for asking you
it,
this.
it depends on what time period you're talking about, because today, Moor actually refers to a certain people living in Mauritania that are called Charza, and Hassaniya. They're actually descendants of and they live in Senegal as well. And they're actually descendants of the Arab people that came over as Bani Makil, Sulaim, Hilal. But the word Moor has been used by, especially by Europeans recently for North Africans in general, or Muslim North Africans in general. So that started really after the 17th century. But Moor, when I'm writing about the Moors and the original people called Maori, we're talking about a completely different people from the Syrian people, or even the black people called Arabs that came over directly after, in the early Islamic period. So Moor really referred to people also called Berbers. They're now called, I don't know if I should say this right off the bat, but even the word Bambara is related to these people who are called Bari Bari or Bari Bra, and who the Arabic writers called El Barabir. So people like the Sonink and the Gawa, the Songhai or Sugai, and various Sudanic peoples, especially those who related to the Kanuri and the people that came down and adopted the Mand dialects and were originally speaking Nilo-Saharan dialects. So all these Sonink people, including the Gnawa or Ijnawan, these people were originally called Babars or Barabra. The other people that were called Berbers were the veiled people we call them Tuareg now. They call themselves the Tamashek or Imishag. And that is where the word Amazigh, now used in North Africa, comes from. And that was adopted in the early 20th century when different nationalists in the Kabyle area and certain other regions along the coast started, wanting to free themselves from colonialists, from the French and British colonialists, or Spanish colonialists. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Doctor. Like I said at the beginning, you're very perceptive because actually, it wasn't meant to be a trick question. It was actually because I know I knew that uh I know that you know your stuff, and one of the first things you said was this looks like a Syrian, and actually the painting. There's a reason I put this up because the painting is by a fellow called, if I can find his name, Fyodor Shazarov. I believe that's French, and it's of Ali Ben Hamet, the Caliph of Constantinople, and followed by his escort is the title of the painting. So it's a Caliph of Constantinople, and I believe Constantinople is modern day Turkey. That would be Istanbul, and
Correct.
so when you say Syria, you're not far off. You're talking at some a place out of Africa completely. But this image is, ironically, maybe not ironically, but maybe more deliberately, maybe more conspiratorially, is what comes up when you type in more into Google nowadays. This is what will come up before. This is one of the first images that will come up. But it's ironic that again, and it's interesting that you pointed out almost immediately Syrian or Syriac or some other extraction that isn't typically North African or even African or whatever. This is somebody from a completely different, but when from a completely different continent altogether. But when more is put into Google, this is what comes up, and it's just very interesting because Wikipedia actually says in its first few sentences on the topic of the Moors, Europeans of the Middle Ages and the early modern period variously applied the name, as you've just said, Doctor, to Arabs, Berbers, and Muslim Europeans. And then it cites, in saying that, Wikipedia is citing a man called Josiah Blackmore in his book Moorings, Portuguese Expansion and the Writing of Africa. And he himself says that they've not really quoted him properly, but what he says actually is the traditional, even stereotypical figure of the African in medieval and early modern culture was usually the Moor, most often Arabic speaking North African Muslim, not a Turk, Arabic speaking North African Muslim. And it's important, I think, to distinguish that it's not a Turk because that is typically the region of Greek, Hellenistic, Roman, Byzantine sort of empire, right when the Moors themselves are on their ascendancy in North Africa. Am I correct in that statement?
That the person did not mean Turk. Yeah, Turk refers to, near Turkey or the Kurds. Like this guy might be Kurdish and he's from.
I think Kurdish, yes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what's not correct is that the early Moors were portrayed as this kind of person.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
And those
exactly.
were
I
not even
think
the kind of people that mostly came into North Africa. Most people that came into North Africa were Arabs. This is not, these people, Kurds and people in Syria or Armenia, not Armenia, sorry, the Levant in general, Palestine, a lot of people are descendants of these Kurdish, Circassian, and other non-Semitic, non-Arab people. Um, when I write about Arabs, I like to write about the genuine Arabs or the original Arabs that are separate from the Arabized people, and even
right.
most of the people
Sorry,
that are.
sorry to interrupt you. Sorry to interrupt you, Doctor. We will get to that. We will get to that. I want to take us through a certain trajectory. First, we'll say thank you to Trap Effects, who says Big Man Trill Black and Auntie Dana. And that's a £10 super chat from Trap Effects, who says my Auntie Dana. I'm not sure if that's that's a money because she may want or not one. I don't know. But there we go. So I just want to say, Doctor, can we clarify then, based on what you said, you've mentioned that early on, the people that were referred to or known as Moors were different to what we kind of call Moors now, what mainstream historians are calling Moors today. And one quote that you get if you go digging is one from Isidore of Seville, and I think I found this quote on a website of yours, or some one of your pieces anywhere online, available
Mhm.
online, and you quoted Isidore of Seville as a famous Catholic thinker and medieval Spanish scholar, and he said, "Black is the color of the Moors, for the Greeks call black Mauron." Um, what did he mean by that? Just for the layman, what did he actually mean by that statement?
Um, well, he meant what he said. I mean,
Yeah.
actually, at the time, black was Mori. It's still in Greece. They call, the N word is actually a variant of the word more. So it's Mabri. So that's always been the case in the early Mediterranean. According to Strabo, the Moors, it actually was an indigenous term, but according to him and other early Greeks of the period, other early Romans of the first century AD, the Moors were a black people, a black-skinned people. And later,
Wow. Wow.
Procopius also said the Moors. He was a little later, Neo-Roman period, said the Moors were black-skinned, unlike the Vandals who were there at the time. This was the 5th, 6th century. And
That's a
actually,
Roman writer. That's a Roman writer who says that.
Byzantine.
Byzantine.
We call them Greco-Romans or Neo-Roman, yeah. But there were many. I have a whole list on different sites of early Byzantine and Roman writers that said that the Moors were black. But not only them, but at that time, the word Indi also meant black. So the Garamantes are called both. For example, I think it's Isidore that said there were 3 Ethiopian races: the Indi, the Garamantes, and the Hesperians. Hesperians means the people occupying the Atlas in Morocco. And those people were called, are the same people basically that were called Moors. They were also the Masmuda Berbers, who are still basically, an African-looking people. When I say African, I'm talking about black African-looking people. So they're dark brown, mere black people still living in the Atlas that are descendants of these early Berbers.
Still living in the Atlas, Doctor.
Yes.
Wow.
And not only in the Atlas, but in Tangiers, there's still the real Berber tribes of Masmuda origin living, close to where. So, for example, there was a text called, I think it's the 8th century text called the, what's it called? The Latin Andalusian, I don't know, it's something with the name Andalusian in it. But it was written by one of the early Spanish, and he's talking about how the Moors came into, that Syrian people had come into, because actually a lot of the people that did occupy Iberia were of non-black origin. There were Slavic, there were Syrian, there were Iranian. Now, Persian and Turkish people, and those 2 people, the latter, were called the slaves by the Arabs, and that is because a lot of the early slaves came from the Syrians, Turks, and the Central Asians called Iranians, or at that time.
Brilliant point, Doctor.
And I wanted to mention, like, these Syrian people came in with their horses, and they met in Tangiers, or the area across from Gibraltar. They met the Moors on their beautiful horses, and they said that they gnashed their white teeth, and their own horses withdrew in horror at the color or complexion of the Moors' skin. Okay, so that's the same time that Isidore was writing and said that the Moors were black while the Gauls were white. Black as night, actually. So
black as night.
Black as night. So when we're talking about black, we're not just talking about, dark brown or maybe like African Americans or like myself. We're talking about people darker than you.
Wow.
A lot of times, like the Masmuda in Morocco now, a lot of them are still, I guess, between me and you. They're still black. The Masmuda, up until the 14th and 15th century, were described as black-skinned people. Although all Berbers at one time or another were described as black-complexioned people, descendants of, because they were also said to be cursed by Canaan. So the Nabateans, the Copts at that time, the Berbers, the Habesha or Ethiopians in Hausa, the Zanj, all these people were considered to be cursed by Canaan. Okay? And that's how they got their blackness. That is literally what al-Damashqi said. I think he was he was either 12th or 14th century. He said that these people became black due to the curse of Ham. These
I've heard
brothers,
of that. I've heard we've heard of that. That's based on the Genesis story, isn't it?
yeah, it's based on the later interpretations of the Genesis story. But the point
Yeah.
is the fact that they're being called black, no matter whatever the reason. The Berbers, up until the 14th and 15th century, were called black.
Mm.
Ibn Khaldun, um, an Andalusian origin, Tunisian, and that's where a lot of these people in North Africa came in. Excuse me, from Andalusia later on. So they're Andalusian people. Leo Africanus was an Andalusian of Andalusian origin. So Ibn Khaldun said that the most numerous of the Berbers at that time were the Zenata, and that the Zenata, many people thought that the Berbers were black due to a curse. So, that's right up until the 15th century that the Arabic or Arabicized writers were, writing about what the Berbers looked like.
Doctor, this is amazing. This is actually amazing information. I want to ask you something based on what you've just said, based on all these sources, Byzantine sources, uh, Roman era sources, by our standards today, ancient sources, right? Can we trust these and other scholars from the late Roman, Byzantine, medieval period, people like you said, Procopius, who described the Moors, like you're saying, not in ambiguous terms, as black people? Or were they confused? Some have actually suggested they were confused. I read a Wikipedia entry. I think it might have been scrubbed by now. Maybe it's too embarrassing to leave on there. But I think I read it actually cited some academics that explain away these accounts by saying that they explain away these accounts by saying some of the Romans being foreign to that region were confused by who was actually a Moor or whatever. Can we do we listen to these people, or can we actually trust these primary sources that tell us who the Moors were?
Well, first of all, I call Wikipedia Wickedpedia for a reason. It's Wickedpedia. Everything
I'm
that
gonna write that down.
everything you see on there regarding the ancient Arabs and the ancient Moors is been turned around, and they'll even put sculptures of so-called Berbers and Arabs from the earliest periods and claim them to be representing of the Himyarites and Sabians and the Moorish leaders, Massinissa and Juba. So they weren't confused. If they were confused, I mean, not only were these early writers, some of them in North Africa, or a lot of them were in North Africa, but the Moors were in Spain. They conquered, even in pre-Islamic times, had conquered certain parts of Iberia and Spain. So they were talking about at that period, as blacks. In the 4th century, long before Islam came to Africa. The Maori did not mean black in the language of those Masmuda people. However, it definitely came to mean black, or just like the word Niger came to mean black, okay, from which comes the word Negro, whatever. Niger came to mean black. The word Kush did not originally mean black, though it came to mean black. The word Kedar did not originally mean the black people. Even the word Sudan, even though that means the black cultivated soil originally, referred to there's a people, an Arab people known as the Sudan. It's actually the plural of Suwaid, which was one of the tribes that came into early Africa. But there's people of the Hawitate that were living in Jordan since they were black. That's possibly how the term in Arabic came to refer to all people that looked like them. the Sudan. And you'll find some of these people in called brethren of these people called Saidi in which is a different word, but it's still, they were part of the Hawatite people who lived in Jordan. And the reason I bring that up is because still today you'll find in Transjordania, in the Gower region, these black people extending to actually the Dead Sea, who are Bedouin black people that look just like other West Africans. But so, and the fact is, like I said, many of the Moors are still black. Many of the people they were calling Moors are still black. The Zagawa people, who were considered one of the Zenata people, are still black. The word Jarawa or Jawara, which was a huge proportion of the Zenata people, was the word for the Gara people, or Karain, they're now also called, that live in Chad and Libya. And they were the founders of what's called Garamis and Garama, or Jerma. So the Garamantians themselves were black due to the fact that they were black, not because they confused anything. And the skeletons only just recently have been confirmed, to be those of other sub-Saharan African type people.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. With a slight proportion of Roman era Egyptian in them. So, yeah, the people were called black for a reason. And even in early Europe, or even in early Europe, Italy, Germany especially, more of course meant black. And you have heraldry all over Europe with names, as J.A. Rogers showed. That's a Roman, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's just the slides lagging behind. It's Procopius. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Yes, okay. Well, okay. Anyway, so the Romans came into North Africa in large numbers and settled there in the Byzantine period and even before that. The Vandals came in by the tens of thousands into the area of what's now Algeria, in the Kabyle area. And that's why Procopius said, he actually talks about that even at that time they had grown to an enormous number, these Germanic people. And that's why even in Egypt you'll find people saying, oh, the Berbers are just the Germans, So the descendants of no, seriously, that's what they teach their students.
That the Berbers are Germans.
Yeah, well, they are descendants of the Vandals, yeah. So, which a lot of them are today, or the people that are speaking Berber and calling themselves either Berber or Amazigh are descendants of these people, as well as Romans, as well as Turkish people. I personally know some people in my ex-husband's family from the Kabyle that look to me exactly like people from Turkey or even Turkmenistan. And those actually people came to be the ruling class of not only Egypt but parts of Algeria, and even further west and east. So
Doctor,
between
I just want to just sorry to interrupt you there. I just want to read out a very very simple statement from Black Rampage 2. He sends a $20, $19.99 super chat saying Trill. Thank you very much for that. It's much appreciated. I want to ask you this, Doctor. So obviously these people weren't confused, like you said. Um, they knew what they were talking about, and they again and again have said the Moors are black. They're not black people. These are ancient sources now. The Saracens. This picture I have up here is of a Saracen giant or wizard. I can't remember his name now, but it's of a Saracen. And when I saw it, I couldn't believe it. I thought, I mean, I'd heard that amongst the Saracens, who were, I believe, they were said to be a warlike and conquering people from the Arabian Peninsula. Could you explain why very frequently, Doctor? You will have to go digging for them, but they are there. Could you explain why very frequently some of the Saracens, quite a few of the Saracens are depicted as blacks, African blacks? Could you explain that to us?
Well, in the Crusader period, the whole of Palestine was occupied by people of called the Ta'i, or Arabs, that came from the Yemen or area south of Mecca, mainly of the Madij stock. Madij, or, well, I guess you guys wouldn't know what that is. So in the area of Yemen, and actually the entirety of Arabia was still mostly black at the time, but especially peoples of the Yemen of the Madij stock, and they settled in Ramallah and a lot of the early Palestinian towns. The Banu Kanana also, which we get the name Canaanite, also settled there. Some of the people that settled from the Hejaz were literally giants described as over 8 feet tall.
Wow.
People of the Khazraj and Aus stock. The Khazraj and Aus came from the Azj of the Asir area that used to occupy Yemen before the Exodus from Meribah, as it's told in the Bible. That's another story. But these people settled in the Hejaz. They are described usually as giants. Even Muhammad's family, some of his ancestors, great grandfather Abdul Muttalib was one of them. One of the
Abdal Muttalib.
yes, that's why he and his sons were described as looking like black camels circling the Kaaba.
Wow.
Yes, because they were giants. So that is also not a a confusion, some kind of confusion or fantasy. The people were literally described as giants. Ubada bin Samit, one of the Khazraj people, for example, were generals or under the Umayyad Caliphate. He went in with his people into Egypt. I think this was in the Foot al Misra, where he was described as that the Makakis there, the Magog, in other words, the Byzantine ruler there, said, "Get this black man away from me," and and the reason he said it was because he was not only black, he was a giant. He said, "He scares me," and so Rebecca in Summit said, "Okay, you think you're scared now? I'll go back and bring back 1,000 of my kinsmen blacker than me and scarier, and you'll see what being scared is like." So this is in the text, in the Arabic sources. So a lot of the people in Hejaz, and you'll see it even in Saudi Arabia, up until the 20th century, the colonialists were describing the Azd Sanua people called Dawasir or Dosari as black giants. So that's a fact. The Azd and the Saracens, even the Crusader texts, Itinerarium Peregrinorum of the time of Richard, King Richard what was it? I don't know if it was the first, second, or whatever. 11th century, 12th century text about the Saracens says that these people were black as soot, blacker than soot. The other people that the same text described as black were the Moors. Who lived in Africa. They said next to the Gaetuli. And the Gaetuli were actually also black ones. But so the Moors and up, they're well described. Some of them are still, like I said, around in these places. Like even in 20th century, up until the early 20th century, that a Turkish Ottoman photographer went to Medina and said that most of the people in Medina were black, except there were a few pale people there.
But they never show us these. I watched a documentary a few months back about it was set somewhere in North Africa, and I had to turn it off. I think I was getting frustrated at the fact that we're in Africa, and this documentary is showing us uh, just the sights and sounds and smells of North Africa, but nary a black face did I see. And I kept thinking to myself, I know that the place is dominated by uh, relative newcomers, or as it is today, but surely, in this 1.5 hour documentary, there are some black people that you can show us on the continent of Africa, because we know they're there, and I had to just turn it off because I couldn't stand it.
Yeah,
But they never show us these people.
yeah. They have a narrative I call the Tarzan narrative, and that is that the black person in Africa can only be, uh, you know, a Negro, a so-called Negro from the Tarzan movie, and then everybody else that's civilized, it has to be fairer. It has to be considered white or related to European. But I mean, I myself, I've gone through, like on my Facebook page and elsewhere, I've gone through different towns of Numidia, ancient Numidia in central now in central Algeria and central Tunisia and places like that, where these oasis towns were that Leo Africanus talked about. Gadames, uh, Tuvert, Tehart, the Zab. There's literally dozens of places that you can go and just. I mean, I put them all. I put all these photos on my Facebook page, but
They're on your Facebook page. What's your Facebook page? What's the title for your Facebook page?
it is. Hold on a second. Well, it's Dana Reynolds-Marniche, and then
Okay, just your name.
Reynolds hyphen Marniche, and then it's African Arc. African Arc. Yeah.
African art. Thank you for that. I'll have to check that out. That's
And
yeah, and if you have the time, listeners, please check that out. Dr. Dana's Facebook page. Doctor, I
yeah,
want to ask you this. These people on screen, I don't know if you can see it right now, but
yeah.
I want to ask, are these Berbers? If not, who then? I know you were talking about the Berbers earlier on, and you touched on it, but I just want to know, more properly speaking now, if these are not Berbers, who we're looking at, I mean, properly speaking now, originally speaking, if they're not Berbers, then who are the Berbers, when the term is at home? And I also want to say, um, I believe you yourself are of I think I read on your page somewhere that you're a Fulani. You've traced your heritage back to the Fulani. So technically you're a more you're not, if I think it was something like 70% Fulani, that would make you well, I don't know, that might make you a more of that. Is
Well,
that
like I said, Moor was just used mainly for after a time after the Islamic period for black
mm,
people and black
but,
people
but
in general. But
but you are of Fulani heritage, right? Am I right in stating that?
not heritage, but genetically,
Genetically, of course, yeah.
I'm mostly of probably even Wodabi, because people in my family are very tall. But or even possibly Tuareg on my dad's side. But
Wow.
um, yeah, I mean, but most African Americans have either the Soning or Fulani or um, Songhai Hausa, and I'm sure British blacks do too. So we're all in a sense, but the interesting thing is the word legally that they used for us over here sometimes was Berber.
Mm.
They said they said in their legal document that was found by another African American or Moorish American actually, a legal document was found that said that I think it was dating to the 17th century or 18th century, maybe 18th century. I can't remember, but it said that uh, the
I
people.
have the quote here, Doctor. I have the quote. Let me just read it out for just so we have it and we're not accused of making things up. It's from your work. I found it on an academia website, and it goes something like this. The term Negro, I think you said in your paper, you said the Negro law of South Carolina stated, um, the term Negro is confined to slave Africans (brackets the ancient Berbers) close brackets and their descendants. It does not embrace the free inhabitants of Africa, such as the Egyptians, Moors, or the Negro Asiatics, such as the Lascars. But what's important, close quote, what's important to note is that from this South Carolina document from 1848, it says the term Negro is confined to slave Africans, brackets, the ancient Berbers. That's an American document from South Carolina
Yeah,
that you cited yourself in your work,
yeah,
say
correct.
claiming that Negroes were ancient Berbers.
Yeah, the ancient Berbers. Yeah. So, and the fact is, at the time, the word Barbara was also used in Italy. If you look at the Italian paintings of the Barbara people, they're also, basically West Africans in appearance. They're dressed very elegantly because they come from, at that time, up until like the 15th century, Ghana was considered to have the best dressed people in the world. So, like Gao, when I say Ghana, I'm not talking about today's Ghana. I'm talking about the Empire of Ghana,
Right, right.
where the Soninke were and all these other Songhai and all these other people came from. So they were considered to be the richest people in the world and also the best dressed. They had trade with, as far away as China and the Near Eastern countries, Europe, Genoa. Um, so those Barbara were also coming into Italy dressed in their finest, almost looking like today's, today's you know, some of the Black American.
Yeah, yeah, of course. That's something you can't help but identify whatever time or place you go. We carry that sartorial swag, shall we say?
Yeah, exactly. But as far as this picture, though, it looks like there might be the so-called Amazigh from Libya or Gadames or
Mm-hmm.
Nafusa area. I'm not sure which area it is. But of course, you also find the black Berbers there too, the darker skin, because the area was completely once occupied by the Zagai people or Zagawa and the Tuareg. The Zagawa are also called Zawaga. So in Spain, so the Nafusa area of Libya, the Gadames area of Libya, most of that area is still black. Black. Those are the Berbers and the black. Um,
Mm.
yeah. So, but these look like, yeah, they have the Berber culture and they're part. They, might have some Berber in them biologically, but
Yeah.
obviously not what the Berbers look like, and they're not
No, no.
mostly. They're not mostly even of African. Um, well, we can consider mulatto people. Like I have my
Yeah.
family, a lot of mulatto people. I have no problem with that, but don't. I'm not. They're not going to go around saying that all Africans look like them or all
Mm.
Europeans look like the ancient Africans look like them, or my Reynolds ancestors looked like me. Obviously,
Mm.
I'm not going to say that. So, yeah,
Yeah, Doctor,
because
I want to ask you, what of the Kabyle people? This picture I found, I know you've done some work on the Kabyle people, or you mentioned them here and there in your work.
yeah,
And today they are not, again, what mainstream historians today will do is to just show you pictures of much fairer skinned people and say these are the Kabyle people of North Africa. But
right.
I think you've done some work on the Kabyle people yourself. Who were they? This picture is of a Kabyle woman, I believe, I found on the internet from early 20th century. But who properly were the Kabyle people as well?
They were also people of the Sanhaja Berber stock uh, that were living in the hills. Now, mountains. I'm sorry, called mountains are in I guess it's Arabic. Yeah, Jebel or Kabyle is mountain people. Okay, so
Right,
you had
right.
even until the 20th century, you had descriptions of the Kabyles as the ones that were related to Numidians being very dark and almost black color, and then you had descriptions of other Kabyle people. So there were distinct Kabyle people up until the 20th century, early 20th century. But then later on, as I say in one of my articles, it became the narrative to state that Berbers were actually European white, and so the white Kabbalists must be the true ones, originally Christians and originally European in color. And ever since then, they've been going into North Africa, into the places of the white slave trade, because a large number of white people were brought into these areas, like Meknes in Morocco, and they've been taking DNA and saying, "Oh, look, the Berbers are related to Europeans." You know, the same, similar to what they did in with ancient Egypt, where there were certain towns that were occupied mainly by non-African people. They've done the same thing. Geneticists have gone and said, "Oh, these people were related to, Turks or Anatolians, so they must have been there. All of Egypt must have been Anatolian looking, or originated in Anatolia." So yeah, Kabbales. I met, I think, one Kabyle Berber that was dark skinned when I was, married to my Kabyle husband before. Um, and they're very nice people, happy people, to me, they're very paternalistic. I'll just put it that way. Most paternalistic people in Africa. But, and the real racism in Africa comes from where I found it is in Morocco, in northern Morocco.
Wow.
Um, but even when I was I lived in France for a while, and I remember this Moroccan guy that wanted to, I guess he was trying to impress me or something. He came up to me and he was like a light skin like my brother, and he said he was making fun of this blacker African friend of his, and saying, "Oh, he's a nigger," meaning black French. I'm like, "Yes, we're nigger, you know, you some
So
nigger."
he thought he could make that joke because what he was assuming you were lighter skinned, sort of north.
Yeah, so I was gonna, make fun of him because in Europe, Morocco, I said Europe, but I meant Morocco, and his, northern Morocco, they actually look down on, of course, dark African people, and a lot of it comes due to the fact that, after the Ottoman period, there was lot more of the black slavery, um, where black people were brought in, more often as slaves than Andalusian people. European people. But that's a fact. There are books that have been done on the white slave trade into North Africa, and I even wrote about it in my latest book on the Moors was Fear of Blackness. So that was an entire article of a journal, and I wrote about how places like Meknes and all these other places in North Africa where they're calling them Berbers were actually where the confluence of European slaves were brought in, and it's documented in text. But it's not like I'm the one that's writing about it. It's people who specialize on the subject matter and have written about the numbers, millions of Europeans that have been brought into North Africa, especially where you see them today in northern parts of North Africa, all the way extending to Libya. So,
Right.
yeah,
Doctor, I want to ask you this. On the basis of what you said about the Moors, the Saracens, the Berbers, is it fair then to say that at some point in history, if the Moors proper and originally were a black African people, is it fair to then say, quite simply, blacks built Europe, or at least as much a hand in the creation of what you might call early modern Europe as whites have had in building, say, what is today modern Africa. Is it fair to say that?
no, blacks didn't build Europe. Let's not get crazy. But the Moorish civilization was definitely built mainly by black.
Right, that's what I mean. So when I say blacks, I'm referring to these Moors, and I'm
Yeah,
saying when I say built Europe, I'm talking about at least that southern part of Europe, Spain and Sicily and Italy, that southern part of Europe that they dominated for a good part of um I don't know the early Middle Ages and the Dark Ages.
Well, like I say, the Moorish civilization itself, and not all of southern Italy or southern Spain was dominated originally by the Moors. I mean, of course, there were earlier people there, but there were also Phoenicians there, though. There were also Phoenician people in that area.
Mm, mm,
But I mean, to go around saying that the Moors built Europe, or the Moors were, all the Vikings were Moors and all that stuff, is why people are not taking us seriously. You know, we have to be
right,
careful when we're talking about this. But anytime you see a castle in Europe, you're basically seeing the influence of the Moors, because even
right,
in the early Near East, the Near Eastern people themselves said that the people that built civilization were black people called Nabateans, and that they said that the Nabatean rulers were called Nemarat or Nimrod. And if you understand the early tribes of Arabia, one of their tribes of the Rabia were known as a Numer ibn Qasit. So this was a literal tribe that, according to tradition, settled in ancient Babylonia and in southern Mesopotamia and built civilization. They also are living in the area of Jordan, as I had mentioned, all these Nabati and Canaanite people. Now, the Nabatians, for example, they came from people, the word comes from a people, literal documented people called the Nabatu. And these Nabatu once lived in the area of Petra and Jordan, extending down to the Hejaz. And the remnant were the Nabate people in the Aus Khazraj group I was telling you about, the Az groups. So when you look at all the traditions about Nimrod being a giant,
mm,
about about Og being a giant and all this stuff, that actually comes out of fact. These people, even some of the people that claim to come from the region, like the Tutsi, claim to have come from the north now
mm.
from Arabia. These people, some of them are over 8 feet tall. The Tuareg themselves, a lot of them are still over 7 feet tall.
The
So,
Maasai, do the Maasai have anything to do with it?
well, the Maasai are part, half, I would say. The Maasai, I'm not sure why you're bringing them up, but
No, I'm bringing them up because you're talking about the height of the people, and I know the Maasai are from East Africa. So do they cross over at any point?
well,
Could it include some of them?
well, the reason I'm asking you is because I wondered how tall the Maasai are. Are they just over 6 feet, or are they 7 feet? Like,
Right, right.
but as far as I'm aware, the Maasai originally are related to the Rondili and other people that probably once occupied the Horn of Africa and Arabia, because both sides of the Red Sea were up until the 18th century occupied by the tribal names were the same. Okay, so you'll find that the Maura are located even in Somalia. The tribes of the Kara are located in Somalia, and these were the people that came over in. Well, one thing I did about the Maasai, I'm not sure if I was stretching matters, but it was interesting that the Maasai called their warriors El Moran, like the tribes of
Mm,
like the tribes of the ancient Arameans. So, and I know that the ancient Arameans came from southern Arabia as well.
mm,
That's a whole other story. See, so
mm,
the Maasai used to be called, and the Samburu and people like that used to be called half Hamites, the half Hamites, because of their obvious connection to, an appearance wise, they look like a lot of like the people of, the so-called Cushitic peoples. Um, Now they speak Nile. I think they speak Nilo-Saharan dialects today, and that's the question: is where did the Nilo-Saharan dialects come in? Because it appears as if a lot of these Berber people themselves adopted the Nilo-Saharan dialect as they moved. Um, and they might have moved from Arabia, in fact, into the Elephantine area where they were Aramean Jewish people. But so you have to know the whole story about how the Nabateans actually, or the speakers of Aramaic and all that. Nabateans were the original speakers of Aramaic. Okay, now it's called Arabic, Aramaic. But what happened was the Parthians, people from Central Asia, came in and adopted the Nabatean dialects, and so that language is now called Aramean too. So
Yeah.
the whole interesting thing, but it's important to note that the Nabateans came originally from the south, like most so-called Semitic peoples came from the southern parts of Arabia, and five to 7,000 years BC, there was an entire African circuit of peoples that occupied Arabia and East Africa. These people were the same culturally because we know because of the rock art and the lithic industries. So archaeology shows it, and the little study that's been done on the um, races there, so-called races or biological types there, show that they
Mm-hmm.
were East African and rather large-bodied Negroid people as well.
Wow.
Yeah. In fact,
I even wonder whether some of the Bible's mention of Nephilim could perhaps include some of these people.
the Dawasir people, okay, as I had in one of my, this is another thing that if anybody's on Egypt search forum, you have to go back and try to make make copies of what I wrote up there because I can't get in anymore. I don't know if it's still even up there, but I wrote a lot about that stuff, about the people called Nephilim that are still living in or in among the Dawasir tribes. Like as I said, the Dawasar or as Sanua were giants over 8 feet tall. They are
Wow.
still, some of them are still living there. Some of these Dawasir people are still living there for people to see. I'm not
Wow.
going over in Saudi Arabia. I'm not going over there. But this is what, and this is what I got into this study because I lived in New York for a while and in the YMCA, and I saw these different people coming from different parts of the world, and they were telling me that they were from Central Arabia and from um, what's that Samoa and places like that. And I'm saying, oh, were you brought there as a slave? At that time I was like 18. And I felt so stupid after finding out, and they would be really angry, which they should have been, because this is what we were taught, you know.
Yeah.
And then one of the guys was like, when I say giant, I'm talking about I've never seen any somebody with a physical structure that huge. This man looked like a walking tree when he walked too, just gliding.
Wow.
He was not much taller than me, just like a foot probably over 6 feet. But he wasn't that tall, but his frame was much bigger than any African you will ever see. And those are the people that you will see among the Central Arabian blacks. And another thing was he didn't really have like a nasal bridge like we do. His nose was like very, very broad, very, very broad, big and very broad, not aquiline at all. He had a big afro, like frizzy afro. Um,
Wow.
his skin was more copper than mine, but probably a little slightly darker.
Mm.
And yeah, I was just confused because where were all these people? He was telling me he came from Uda or something like that. I'm like,
Mm.
I'm like, Judah? And he said, no, Uda. And then I came to find out there was a place near El Karj, near, not far from Riyadh and all, called Uda, and that people do live there that look like him, you know. And this area was the area originally, of course, like I said, originally the entirety of Arabia was part of Sudan, really. It was called Bilad es Sudan by certain early Arabicized writers. That word Bilad es Sudan extended to Indonesia, or the land of Java, and Indochina, where you had a lot of like Kunlun people and other black people, the ones that had built Angkor, Thom, Nakhon Wat, places like that. So Cambodia and all these places, they used to be black. Okay, you'll even find them up in the Mughal caves, up in I don't know if it's Mongolia or China. You'll find that these people extended to that area.
Mm.
So yeah, you just have to know that if so. I'm right now. I'm doing a course actually for people that want to learn about the tribes of Arabia and how they're related to the biblical peoples and how they
Yes.
were
But
how they were all described as black skinned because that's a lot of people don't want to hear that even though
no,
apparently
they don't.
ours are. I'm not even talking about black people. They want to say that they're brown and stuff. A lot of them were black, like the as people were considered Shadid al Udma, meaning extremely black in color. And this was
Mm,
Abdul Muttalib's parentage, the
mm.
Al group of the as. So yeah, the biblical people were basically the people, the African Arabian peoples.
Oh, spoiler alert, spoiler alert. I wanted to bring us to that soon, but still a little more gradually. I wanted to ask you this first before we get to that more properly. I do agree with you. We do tend to then we can lose sight of what's important and then not be taken seriously. So I'll rephrase: blacks were involved in that era. If the Moors were blacks, blacks were involved in that building, in that culture of Southern Europe that came out of the invasion of the Moors in that period. So that's what I would say. I would agree with you on that. But having said that, Doctor, there's a paper of yours again. I think it's titled "Addendum." It's an addendum to a work you had done earlier, and in
Right.
that you write, with the promotion of scientific raciology in Western anthropology and rise of Aryanist ideology in Europe, the colonialist rhetoric changed to viewing the quintessential Berber as represented by very fair complexioned types presumed indigenous to North Africa, although even archaeologists of the time were convinced blonde Libyans were, quote, intrusive foreigners. You cite a work there to back that up. Some geneticists, you go on to say, in modern times appear to have latched on to this, my emphasis, false perspective. Doctor, why would some geneticists latch on to this seemingly false perspective?
Well, a white supremacy. The same way
Mm,
they said that the Garamantes were white. If you look at Diop's African origin of civilization, he was fighting against even that. The fact that um, the Moors in their heraldry, in the European heraldry, all the last names or surnames with Moor, like Mormon or Morelli or Morat, Morrison,
mm,
Swarthmore, all these pictures of Negro heads in their coat of arms, hundreds and hundreds, and they deny it. They deny that the Moors were black.
mm.
They bring up the blackamoors that later on the term blackamoor was used, meaning black as a Moor, really. Um, but all you have to do is look at how the Germans used to portray, and the fact that the Germans still call, their black cookies or dark cookies
Yeah,
Mohrenkoff or whatever. I don't know.
yeah,
But
yeah. I know the one. I know the one.
yeah, it's just a matter of being in denial. They latched on to
Yeah.
um, they want the Berbers because they are a conquering race. Anything that conquered anything else has to be European. So they say
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Semitic people now are supposedly European. So the Israelis now are saying they're the Semitic people, and the Arabs are not Semitic at all. Um,
And you pointed it out actually. You pointed it out somewhere. I think it was on this website, Rasta Live Wire. It's a website.
yeah,
Uh, it's a place I like to go it's got some good resources. I think it's Rasta Live Wire. But you corrected somebody in there a few years back, and you made a point that the Nawa are universally accepted as, I mean, they will accept this because as far as they're concerned, it seems to white supremacy seems to want to portray us always in that small box of slaves. So they're happy with this portrayal. They will happily say the Nawa, yes, we're sub-Saharan slaves brought over to North Africa. But you pointed out to somebody in that forum a few years back that even now they're changing the perception of the Nawa people. The Nawa
they're
people brought.
I'm sorry, you're saying Nawa? What's where are you saying?
Is it the GNAWA? Am I right?
Oh,
Now,
yeah, but you have to say it with a G. Gnawa.
sorry. I thought it was a silent G.
I'm like, oh no, it's Ignawin or Ganawin or Janawa. Yeah,
Wow.
it's a Janawa or Kanawa. Ganawa is what it's. Yeah, Ganawa.
But they're trying to say now, again, when you Google, guys in the chat, if you Google Gnawa, not Nawa, correction there by the good doctor, it's Gnawa, Gnawa. If you Google them, every other picture will show you lighter skinned, near white sort of peoples, when actually, these people are, even according to the UN's statement on them, are descendants of African slaves brought from West Africa at some point in time. But they have a massive input into North African culture and all and that whole scene. But Dr. Reynolds-Marniche has pointed out that even now they're working very hard, it seems, to change the perception of those people to racially ambiguous. Is that correct, Doctor?
Right, right. I didn't know they were doing that so much now, but Ganawa were actually the ancient rulers of a town in what's called Mauritania, called Ghana.
Wow, Martin.
Ghana. This was where Ghana was. And that is why, because Mauritania has to have been white, they're trying to make everything like, for example, if you go through, let me just tell you something. The Tuareg are the Berbers that actually made these Gnawa into slaves. So another sub-Saharan people today. So today they live in Senegal and Mauritania, not so much Mauritania, but Senegal and Mali and Niger. They were increasingly pushed out of North Africa. The Tuareg are the people that actually made the Gnawa into several people, but they are the Janawa
Right.
as well, and they were called. There was actually some ink-related people called Bambara or Babar or Barabira. So if you go to certain texts of the Arabs, so for example, I have this book, which I think everybody needs to, after you've reached a certain level of understanding of certain things, this book, I don't know if anybody can see it,
Can you show it to us? I think your screen is
Frozen.
me frozen. Yeah. So if you can adjust that for us, that would be brilliant, and show us the book.
Oh, I wouldn't know how to adjust that. Why is it frozen? Um, no, I don't know how to do that.
Okay, that's
I,
okay,
no, I,
Doctor.
can, I, can try, I can try to present. No, I can't do it. Can I present?
Um, Doctor, what's the name of the book?
Okay, the name of it is Corpus of Early Arabic Sources for West African History. Corpus, Corpus, of Early Arabic Sources
Sources.
for West African History. For West African History. And
Is that
then,
your book, Doctor?
no, this is a book that was written and it talks about literally dozens, dozens of Arabic writers that, it literally translates their writings about Africa. So, for
Wow.
example, Ibn Battuta, um, Al Damashki, Al Yaqubi, Al Khwarizmi, Al Muqaddasi, Al Ibn Khaldun, all of these literally, what is it? How many is it? 60, I think, maybe, different writings. And you'll see that the Ganawa themselves and the Songhai and all these different places, they were called Berbers as well. And that the Tuareg are the only other Berbers, and those are the people that once occupied the coastal area of Libya with the Zagai or Zagawa people, who occupied the area of Tunisia in the area of Carthage, called Zalgitani. Okay, and that is why later on a Portuguese writer or author talks about the Azawada people as having been the ancient Carthaginians, okay, in northern Tunisia. So it's very important. Actually, we should have learned. Sorry, I'm actually getting over COVID, so I'm having a little problem.
Oh, sorry about that.
I feel much better though. I think I'm over it. But um, we, people who are interested in the study of Africa, should definitely have be learning Arabic
Hmm.
because Arabic is the language of the black man. It's the language that is spoken the best in Sudan and was the script actually comes out of Sudan, but the language comes from the Hijaz and from black people that were living in Hijaz and Arabia. Okay, so but not only because of that, but because the writers, these Hadith writers, and all these other Arabized people, because half, probably more than half of these people writing about Africa were not um, Arab, but were from Iraq and Syria and Kurds
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
else. Those are the people that are writing about Arabia and Africa, and that's why you have this such a clear. You have this thing about Sudan, the Sudan, the lens of the Sudan or the black peoples, um, gradually they came to distinguish the Sudan from the Maghreb and from um, Arabia, which it originally meant. But okay, that's a is she Libyan or
No,
Moroccan?
this is just a I can't remember. I think this also was a Kabila. I might be wrong on that because you be more familiar on
Yeah, I
with these
posted.
issues.
I posted almost every picture you've had up here, but yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah. I can't remember what you. I have to go back and
Okay,
look.
that's fine. That's fine. You probably forgotten more than I can, more than I'm even learning just now. But I want to say, Doctor. Okay, genetics. We know they manipulate it with their biased readings and presentations of it. Can
Mhm.
it help us still? Can genetics still help us?
Yeah, actually, it is starting to help us because there are people that are saying, um, even though there's a lot of misinformation out there, going into modern day Arabia and claiming, those are the ancient Arabs, and then coming back with their haplotypes, that's of course going to be confusing.
Mm.
Um, it is helping. There's other like European. I don't know if it's an East European thing or what, but I've read East European articles that have said that, for example, the Semitic dialects came out of Africa, or that the early Arabs,
That's very interesting. The Eastern European body of work I've found on African history tends to be more honest. I've found that. I don't know if you have as well.
it might be. I started to think that way, and some of the northern or Scandinavian too. But I think because they literally have paintings all over their countries of what the Arabs look like and what the Moors look like.
Of course, of
I mean,
course.
very in Estonia, there's a wonderful painting of the Saracen invaders, you know, and they're just basically not even brown; they're black in their paintings. So
Mm, of
yeah,
course.
and those were 13th and 14th century. I just recently found one of the most important photos of the Arapi or Kara Arapi. The Arapi, as you may or may not know, is the word for black man in Turkey and um, a lot of these Eastern countries, or I think even Yiddish still, but and Russian. So Arapi became the name for a black man or even a black African due to
Could
the
you
fact
spell that for me, please?
Arapi.
P
So
I R P.
it's just a pronunciation of the word Arabic. Okay,
Mm.
Arab or Arapi is the name for a black man. I recently just found a photo from the German World War II era of Germans in Turkey with Arab people. These people look like Ethiopians. They're basically mostly women, they look like basically Sudanese or Ethiopians. I said, oh my gosh, this is
Wow.
why they call them the Kara Arapi, the original Arabs, the Kara Arapi, and they call today well, I even read somebody saying that they were in the military and they went up into Turkey, and the Turks were saying, "Oh, an original Arab, a true Arab, an original Arab." They were like going out of their minds, you know.
Hmm.
So a lot of these people up in Eastern Europe, Turkey, Russia, they know what the early Arabs look like. They know what they have pictures of the early or paintings of the early Christians. That's another thing that people like to avoid. The saint, like a lot of the early saints, going back to the time of Edessa, were either called black or were painted black. And that is because a lot of the people up in, like I said, in Transjordania were of Nabatean and Arab origin. The founders of Edessa, for example, the early Christian, where the Turkish Christians started writing about Canaanites, um, those areas were occupied by Nabateans originally, and the Madij people from the Yemen, tribes of the so-called Khatan group that came up, or that were originally up there, actually, even in the early Christian era. So the Kuda and the same tribes that came into Sudan also went up into those areas. So that is why Burckhardt said, he was an early Swiss Orientalist, I think 17th century or 18th. He said that the people of the Ja'alin tribe of Sudan are identical to those people in Eastern Arabia. So Eastern Arabia till last couple hundred years too was still occupied mainly by the Banu Kab and all these tribes of black Arabs of that were, even today in Iraq you have 2/3 of the black Arabs, excuse me, 2/3 of the black people there are supposedly of the Muntafik, Ukail, and Kab tribes of Banu Hawazin bin Mansur. Okay, and these people, Hawazin, were the people that occupied Central Arabia at the time with the other Rabia tribes. Okay, so the Rabia tribes are the groups that went into Jazeera, which is the area of Turkey that became Arab ruled. They founded Diyarbakir. The Wadi Numera was actually colonized by the Hawazin, and you'll see a nice picture. I have nice pictures of the Bedouin children, black children in their classroom, looking like darker than African Americans, from the Wadi Numera area near the Dead Sea. So a lot of these people are still there, but what's happened is people have tried to make them into, especially since the Zionist era, unfortunately, I have to say that, have tried to make them into non-black people, because
Hmm.
Arabs are black, then somehow the Israelites had to be black and the Semites had to be black. So nobody can be black. I mean, none of the
Hmm.
Syria people in Jericho, still living in Jericho, they all have to be made into slaves. All these people that have been black, even in 1,000 years ago when they were described as black in Jericho, in Beit Shan, in um, Deir Bala, which is in Palestine, and other parts of Palestine, which was called, which actually there were some people used to say, oh, this is part of Ham's land because they were black, land of Ham. So these our people in waves, you know, colonized first in the Neolithic era, and then later on in the Bronze Age, and then the Bronze Age is when you have the Semitic peoples, the Black African peoples coming into Arabia, basically, and settling in the entire, around the entire peninsula, and you have the so-called brown Mediterranean type, so-called Cushitic or Hamitic type settling, especially in areas around the coast. Okay, these were agricultural people, and then you had the taller people who may have come from actually elsewhere, because you have the earliest of the very tall people seem to have been in a place called India or northwestern India. You had people in Lothal province that were similar to the Elementines, but earlier. So both the Wodabi, who are also in that category, Wodabi Fulani, they're the pastoral Fulani groups. They and the Tuareg both claim to have come from actually India in their folklore through Anatolia and down into Arabia, and then finally into Africa. And this had to have been, several thousand years BC, not, not recently. We're not talking about. Even the Tuareg claim that 9 centuries before Dhul Qarnayn, who was Alexander the Great, they came from Palestine into North Africa. And that's not just their tradition, but that's even Josephus had said that the Midianites settled, and these Asurim people, or Asuriani, who are the Tuareg. Oh,
Bless you.
that was a cough, actually. Thanks, Phil. Thank you.
I say bless you to both. It's just like
Oh, good idea, actually. Anyway, Canaanite people, Canaan and Arabia were settled by black people, as was India originally, of various types. And, some were Negroid, some were more like the modern day Amhara or
mm.
the Palasha. So, not Palasha, I don't want to use that. That'd be a bad word now. Somali.
Which I would still class as black. I would still class as black myself.
Somali are, of course, black and blacker than us.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
The ones that I've seen, some of them have shining black skin, like the Houthi and other groups in the Hejaz were described in the 19th century. So, yeah,
Mm.
definitely.
Doctor, I watched a video of yours recently. If you haven't signed up, if you've not come across Dr. Dana Reynolds-Marniche's work, and you want a sort of you want a quick ready access to her and her thoughts and her work, go to her channel and subscribe. I highly recommend watching some of her content, and it's filled with information. It's filled with proper information, not just somebody who's just talking out of where. This is an individual who knows what she's talking about, and she's got a channel. It's called Mount Meru Arts, History and Culture, I believe, Doctor.
I'm sorry.
Your,
Which?
your
Not
channel,
Mel.
your YouTube, yeah.
Um,
MT Mount Meru Culture, History,
no,
Culture and Arts.
no. Well, oh, I'm sorry. On YouTube. Yeah, sorry.
Yes,
I don't even know.
yes.
I don't know the name of that channel. Let me see. Mount Meru. Yeah, MT. Period. MERU. Arts. Mount Meru Arts. Music and
Yeah.
history. Yeah.
Someone suggested I put the link in the chat, and I'm actually going to do that. I'm actually going to put that in the chat in just a minute. I want to ask you something. There's a picture up on the screen for people watching, and I believe you can see it as well. I watched a video of yours recently. It was called "Will the Real Almoravid Please Stand Up? Distortions of Tuareg and West African History." I recommend viewers go and watch this video. It was my first video, my introduction to your YouTube channel. On that video, you discussed the image distortion of a black man known to time and history as Abu Bakr ibn Umar. Doctor, who was Abu Bakr ibn Umar, and is this picture on the screen, is this Abu Bakr ibn Umar?
Well, some people say that it was supposed to represent him, but now there's others. Since I posted that video, others are saying it doesn't say anything. But I have to look at this Arabic. This happens to be the same cover that's on the cover of the book I was talking about, Corpus of Early Arabic Sources for West African History. But anyway, Abu Bakr was a Tuareg, Al-Targi. He was called Al-Targi. So he was a
Hmm.
Lamtuna Berber. And there's several versions, I guess, of this painting where the guy on the camel is represented as black. And then there's this one representing, I don't know what he's supposed to be representing because the Tuareg, even the light skinned Tuareg don't look like that. But, so, unless, just representing a slave, because the Tuareg were great slave traders
Hmm. Hmm.
in, even into Niger and places like Agadir. So, and you have different narratives of that on JSTOR and other places. This is documented that the Tuareg were great slave traders. Now, they did tend to marry their slaves, whether they were white or black. The first time you hear about the Tuareg um, as Nasamones in Nusamani, Kel and Nusamani, is in the writings of Corpus, and he's complaining about their ruler, Gildo, which is the Tuareg name for a ruler, Aguilid or Galadima, from Goliath. Okay, Gildo
Ah.
the Gildo the Moor. Yeah, the word Goliath is the same. Gildo the Moor taking slaves from the Romans in the Levant. The Roman women, and making Ethiopian hybrids across North Africa, Roman North Africa. So that's when you first read about, the Tuareg taking slaves, white slaves, and slave women. So, of course, after time, all this slavery, white slavery, is going to change the Tuareg. So when you see a white veil, though, on the Tuareg, it's usually someone of a non-noble caste, and it could be a slave.
Mm. Mm. Because it seems to me like this is an interloper because we actually have a more appropriate image,
Yeah.
and it actually says, or I think it's on the same chart. It says if you look closely, Abu Rex Abubakar, and it has a colon after Rex Abubakar, which is in sort of gilded writing, and you can see Abubakar on the left hand side of that banner, in pitch black. And I think there are Arabic texts which have been sent to me, um, and that I've seen that claim that describe Abu Bakr ibn Umar as pitch black as well, like you've been saying.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yes, yeah.
See, that's what I'm
I,
saying.
I, I sorry, go on.
No, that's what I'm saying. We have to learn Arabic because there's so much written about in Arabic that you would be surprised, about all the people that were called black
When
skinned.
I first came across Ibn Umar, um, this was the image that Google would first present. It was on Wikipedia as well, but soon after I found that the latter image, this one, uh, had kind of taken precedent. Somehow, someone somewhere had made sure that when you search Abu Bakr ibn Umar, this picture, the first one, comes up quite prominently as well. In some cases, sometimes you Google him, and actually, this is the image that you get, and you don't get this latter image.
Right.
And I wonder, is this the same thing that's happening with the rock art in North Africa? Because I've heard you say somewhere else that they're even tampering with the rock art in North Africa as well. Because typically, when you see the rock art in North Africa, you get in images like the one I'm showing on the screen right now. And these, I don't know how anybody can look at them and not think Black Africans. But I think I heard you say that they're distorting rock art as well, or faking them.
Well, they were apparently Henri Lot, I think, or one of his, colleagues was complaining about that they think that they thought some of the rock art was being faked at that time, which was, I think that was back early 20th century too. Back in the early 20th century or mid 20th century, that some of the depictions show like a white skinned lady wearing togas and things. I mean, that really made them suspect, and it looked like something out of a Chanel. Wait, Coco Chanel? No, seriously, fashion now. So I put that all over. I put an article up showing it was the same style of painting, the way they were making the togas and stuff. I'm like, wait, how did toga get in the Sahara? It came from originally from Mexico up into France and Spain. That's how, So yeah, at a certain time period, they were definitely doing that, and we have to be careful because they're definitely doing that in Egypt too. They're doing that,
Mm.
they're changing the paintings, repainting the paintings in the rock tombs, in the tombs, and also you'll see that with the Libyans, that was done for the Libyans as well. Um, I was going to say, when I was at the University of Chicago, there was something called well, we had a library. It was like for a lot of the Orientalist books and things, and you would look up and you would see these dark brown, like these people right here, dark brown Libyans with the same, you know, with the same build and the same small beards and everything, the same side locks and braids as you would see in these books. But in the books, they were always white. And I'm like, well, who are these people? I mean, they look like they could be my brother and stuff. And I found out later they were the Tehanu Libyans, ancient Libyans, the original Tehanu. That then I called back a few years later, or actually no, probably over 10 years later, and I said, where was this from? And they said it was from paintings in Nina Davies' book, and she was one of the people that went over to Egypt and started painting them. But I haven't been able to find that book. All I see is her books with a lighter skin, unless they uh, raised, they redid the books and lightened the pictures. I don't know, but the thing is that painting. If I find it, I'm going to take a picture. You're going to see what I'm talking about. I asked the guy where the picture went because they moved it. It's at it's in New York, at part of the New York University International World History Center or something like that. So I'm gonna have to go up and try to find where that picture went because that shows you what the original Libyans look like, and they do look like Fulani. They look like people that I could have been part of that tribe or something. I was really stunned, to see them. At the time, I didn't know anything about Libyans and stuff. I just wanted to find out, why had I not seen this anywhere else? You know,
Mm. I
it's true.
mean, you mentioned, sorry to interrupt, so doctor, you mentioned white supremacy earlier. Now, I don't want to drag you into any thing controversial, but I wonder, um, yes, there seems to be an element of that going on with some of these things, but it seems to be if it's white supremacy, it seems to be Black African history that tends to be molested in this way more than any other. I mean, the Indians, even the history of the Dravidians and so on and so forth hasn't been tampered with to this extent. I mean, we still till today have the fake Nefertiti bust, I believe fake Nefertiti bust there in the German museum,
Yeah.
and we're talking about faked rock art, faked Egyptian artifacts that make these ancient peoples look like they were something they weren't. Why? What is it? I mean, is what is it about African history per se? I hear you on black white supremacy, but what is it about Black African history that attracts this sort of I don't know, psychosis?
Well, first of all, I have to say, with regard to India and the Dravidians, as probably most of us know, the Dravidians are not considered. They were for a long time considered Caucasoid people, Caucasians,
Hmm.
just
Yeah.
like Ethiopians. You would look up books up until the 1990s and find them described as Caucasians or Caucasoid. So anything that, like I said, has to do with conquest, the colonialists wanted to be related to them. Anything to do with Tarzan had to be, Negro. So that was all that was left over for Black Africans, and that's why you will never see, uh, it has to be us that go and look up this stuff about how the early slaves over here were called Berbers, because they're not going to bring that up because the Berbers, of course, the Barbary Corsairs were the people that went after them, and actually a lot of the reason why black people were treated so badly after they came over here was due to that, the corsairs and what they look like. So a lot of the early corsairs were, of course, black, and they're painted that way. Um, so because they were these Masmuda, Berber people that were living in further north. But yeah, so that's part of it. I had written down a whole list of why we don't know about the true folk of Noah, and it's Orientalists and colonialists don't want. Uh, well, I said they tried to make all blacks in the Near East into African slaves or pre-Adamites,
Yes.
because first of all, Africans could not have lived north of the Sahel or Sahara, or even in the Sahara. um, let's see, and the Middle Eastern people too have since adopted, and Near Eastern people and other people have adopted the names since their conversion to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So they're the ones that, especially Central Asians, fabricated this the allegory of Ham, Shem, and Japheth and distorted it into different races of people. Because originally Ham, Shem, and Japheth were just one people that spread abroad. Even Josephus talks about that. Says that the people that were came to be called Japheth, Shem, were those places where these people first settled. It wasn't, and people took their names. And then you have people like on Wikipedia and copying the scholars who put in Middle Eastern texts pictures of Central Asians, even people that look like Mongolians, and you have Roman and Greek statues representing the Arabs as well as Berbers, rulers, and things of that sort. So it's academics and Western scholars that have put this in their in their books, and then you have the movies and things, MGM Grand, Ben Hur,
Mm.
um, all
Which
that.
I like, by the way.
Oh, I love Ben Hur, yeah. And now, but the funny thing is to find out that there's a tribe called Ben Hur that it still looks rather African in the Netherlands.
No way.
Yes, way. And
What?
it still look rather African, but not only that, of course, Hur was a Horite. He was one of the Horite peoples, along with Hori, who is still there as well as other Horite people that
Mm.
are part of the Kara tribes. That's why I'm giving you this course so the people understand how these
Where
people.
can people get that course, Doctor?
They'll have to text me. Excuse me, email me where you first email me on my Gmail, which was wait, what is it? Because I have so many email sites now.
I'll
And,
find that and I'll post it in the chat.
okay, yeah, that is where I'm having people go to my Google Classroom, and but it's not a free course though. Just tell you that.
Of course, of course.
Yeah. Right now, I'm
Uh,
thinking charging like $200 because I'm realizing it was a lot of work to put this together.
yeah.
I go into how all of how Berber nationalists started creating the fallacy of European-looking Berbers being the true Berbers and that kind of thing. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and I go into right now we're covering all the biblical names of the Khatan or Joktan people, with respect to the original Semitic peoples and what they were called. It's always important to know that all of these people I'm talking about were at one time described as black. Um, yeah, see what they did. I'm reading this. See what they did to Kahina on Google.
Yes, yes, that's the super chat that's come in. Thank you for pointing that out,
Yeah,
Doctor. Um, Jim
uh,
Bob says, see what they did to Al Kahina on Google. Travesty. That's Jim Bob with a £2 super chat. Thank you very
and
much for that.
yeah,
Who's Al Kahina?
well, Al Kahina was one of the queens of the Garawa or Jarawa tribe I was talking to you about, who are still called Gara and Gorain in Chad and Libya, and they were part of the Zanata Berber group. Okay, they became known as Wangarawa or Wangara later on amongst the uh, Soning Songhai. But yeah, and all these groups of Wangara, like I said, these groups that were originally Lama Saharan speaking and adopted the Man dialects, they were Jewish. A lot of these people were Jewish. So Al Kahina
Wow.
was Jewish. And of course, when you're talking about Jewish can't be black, can't be black. So
Wow.
I have to make them into a white people, you know.
So you're telling me, oh my goodness, all right. It looks like I have a lot. I have quite a few apologies to dish out because quite early on when I started this channel, I would get into back and forth with people telling me that about the whole Black Israelites and I would say oh leave that to one side. I don't think we can make that claim. It's not. I thought it was baseless, but as I've gone deeper and deeper into our history. I found that I seem to have been on the wrong side of things there. So
Yeah.
this is incredible. This is incredible. That these people were Jewish.
A lot of these people were Jewish, and probably, from what I've been looking up, it seems like not just Jewish, but originally Judean. But that's a whole other story. That's a whole book that I'm also working on later. But the name Bari itself, you have the whole Nilo-Saharan groups called Bari in the pre-Islamic period, Nega Bari, Adia Bari, along the Nile, the Astaboras, where you had the Nilo-Saharan people, and these people were likely the same people that were called in the Arabian Peninsula, Sabteka, because Strabo and Diodorus said that everything east of the Nile in Africa was considered Arabia in his time, and that Meroe and places like that were actually Sabian. So, I mean, nobody should shoot the messenger. I'm just telling you what they said. The Blemmies themselves seem to have been the people called Bilam or Bila, okay, a tribe of that was part of the Kuda group in Arabia. That in the Bible they're called Bela or the son, brother of Zophar and son of Benjamin, that kind of thing. but so I got you brought up an important thing about the Israelites. Now, if anybody's considered black in ancient time in medieval sources, it's the Israelites. The Banu Sulaim ibn Mansur and the Hawazin ibn Mansur, for example, were tribes in Hijaz around Medina. These tribes also, some of their tribes were of Kuda stock, as I was just talking about. The Kuda had the tribal names of the early Judeans, and they were the people called Cain, Malchain, or Kanuka that were settled in places like Yathrib and the other Jewish areas um, of Hijaz. I hope everybody knows Hijaz is, the area between Jeddah and where Judah, Mecca, and Medina are, the holy land of the Muslims.
Can you spell
And,
it for us, please? Hey,
oh, Hijaz?
yes. Is it
Well, sometimes it's written Hijaz, and
Hijaz?
sometimes it's just Hej, sometimes it's Hedj. So, it's Hijaz. Um, and that is the area where the Chinese said in the 1400s that the people were of a very dark purple color.
Wow.
It was also the place where, at the same period or a little before, Al Damashki wrote that the people were Kudur. Okay, that's a name for Akhdar, means black or near black in color. And he said that the
Wow.
only people there fair in color or fair in complexion were assumed to be descendants of slaves. So once you know that, but anyway, these Sulaim, let me get back. I tend to go off track. The Sulaim people in Egyptian texts are called Shalom, and in the Egyptian Jewish texts are called the Shalom, and in the Targum are called Shalmai. Okay, people of Manasseh. That's where the word Mansur comes from, or is related to Manasseh.
That's Manasseh as in the biblical Manasseh.
Manasseh, son of Joseph, son of Jacob. Yes. So that is why Benjamin of Tudela and David Harubani, an earlier medieval adventurist in Europe from Khaybar in the Hijaz, said that the people around Medina are from the tribe of Manasseh. David Harubani from Khaybar had also said, who was also described as a black dwarf, which the Khaybar people were also described, had also said that not only the tribe of Manasseh, but that his ancestors were in charge of, or his grandfather and father were in charge of, the tribe of Reuben and the tribe of Gad. Okay, so the tribe of Gad actually was the tribe of Jada that founded modern Jeddah, or Jiddah. The tribe of Reuben was described in the 20th century, just a few years ago, as black living in Sinai. But they didn't, just because they're called Reuben, they're not going to automatically pick up that, these people are literally the Reuben, tribe of Reuben. So I have this on my Afro-Asiatic blog spot as well.
Afro-Asiatic Blogspot. That's
Yeah.
afroasiaticblogspot.com.
No, it's Afro-Asiatics, plural.blogspot.com. Yeah.
Afroasiatics plural.blogspot.com. That's afroasiatics.blogspot.com. Doctor,
Yeah.
I want to ask you this quickly. First of all, let me read out the super chat from our friend Surfactant, regular here. Doc, were the Moors connected to the Native Americans? Mansa Musa talked about the river in the Atlantic his predecessor traveled on. Fact or fiction? That's a $5 super chat from Surfactant. Could you shed any light on that, Doctor?
Well, I'm sure there was some African influence both in medieval times and especially in the Olmec times, Olmec period times in Central America, where you have, these heads of Africans on top of pyramids. That they don't tell you that they were found on top of pyramids. But yes, the Gnawa people, these Malink Gnawa people, I think Dr. Van Sertima proved that they came to America. I don't know about, like I said, the Native Americans have their own biology. I mean, they have connection to solar tree and man, and their hair never turns gray when they get old, that kind of thing. But there were definitely sculptures and paintings of Africans here in the medieval period as well. I mean, and they're that can be found online. I posted some online, so I'm sure, yes, that some natives here were African, especially in.
Wow.
Oh yeah, I mean that's pretty much. At least most, a lot of people like me agree with that.
That's incredible. It
But
stands to reason.
but I went to a Native American conference once. I'm part Native American. I don't consider Native Americans African, just because of, like
Mm-hmm.
I said, their hair doesn't turn gray at a certain stuff like that, and they have long, straight, wild hair. But like my dad was 90 years old, and he didn't have a shred of gray hair like I'm getting.
Wow. That's
But
incredible.
yeah, but oh, I was gonna say, I went to a conference and
Yes.
guy was there, Native American guy. Okay, so he was so still, I thought he was dead or something. He withdrew his consciousness into his body as if he was a stone or a rock. And I was looking around the room to see if anybody else noticed it. And when he got up to speak, his oral skills, it was like coming from the ground. And these are, stereotypical Native American traits: stone-faced Indian, oracle, great speakers. Okay, but one of the people there, a lighter-skinned guy, because this other guy was like I've never seen before. He was darker than me. One of the speakers said, "Oh, and the first people to come to us was a black man who had been shipwrecked."
Oh my goodness.
Talking about, yeah, he was either, I think he was Hopi. He was either there was Hopi or Navajo. This one guy, and he said, yeah, black and shipwrecked, And I'm sure that was either, an African, if it wasn't, what's his name, Estebano, with came with, with Columbus or whatever. But I think, yes, the Native
And
Americans probably have themselves uh, have recorded, at least orally, that black people came to visit them, and that.
Doctor,
Yeah, go ahead.
that's incredible. And again, chat, that's a Native American live in the flesh telling the doctor at a talk that the first people to see them from the Atlantic, to come over and visit them from the across the Atlantic, were blacks. A black man, that was. So I hope that answers your question, Safak, to some extent. I just want to move on quickly here, because I don't want to take too much more of your time, Doctor.
I want.
Your
I just want to say one thing though.
Yes.
Dr. Van Sertima had a lot of work about the Goran, the words for gold and other things
Mm.
that were connected to the Mand and Malink people. So if people want, they should start studying or get that book Olmec. I'm sorry, they came before Columbus
They came before Columbus. Yes.
by Dr.
Okay.
Van Sertima, and he talks elsewhere, I think, also about that connection between, these Gnawa or Gino. The people called Gnawa were the Guinea. That's where the word Guinea comes from. So
Mm,
they were
mm, mm.
around the Guinea coast. They were the great. In fact, in this book I was talking to you about, Corpus of Early Africa, it says that the Wangara were the scholars among the Mand, and the Malink were the navigators around the world. Around the world. It says it, and I think it was the Tariq Al Fatah, or Tariq yeah, I think Tariq Al.
Mm,
Yeah, no, Tariq Al Fatah. One of those manuscripts from
mm.
Timbuktu.
I I don't mean to be I don't mean to be salacious with this image that's been on my screen for a while, Doctor. We all remember Lawrence Fishburne's depiction of Othello. I've seen bits of it. I've not seen it from start to end. Now, in the play Shakespeare, in Shakespeare's play, he wrote of a warrior Moor and his white love interest, Desdemona, and the play's character speaks of a quote old black ram topping a white ewe. Not my words, Shakespeare's words.
Right, I remember.
Was Shakespeare's famous love story about a sooty bosomed Moor, that's a quote, with thick lips, and an Italian woman, was that really about I don't know, a tanned uh, Arab, tanned white Arab, as some have begun to recently suggest? It's just yes or no. You don't even have to go deep into it, because it's almost a stupid question. But some people have started to say Othello really wasn't black, and Shakespeare might have meant a tanned sort of a white sort of
No,
Arab person.
they've been saying that. I mean, even my teacher, and when I was in high school, started talking about, oh, just because Shakespeare's love with had kinky hair doesn't mean she was black. Anyway, but anyway, yeah, no, that's the reason I know that is I actually did a big explanation about that in The Fear of Blackness, the other book I was talking to you about.
Fear of
It's
Blackness, The Fear of Blackness. That's another book by Dr. Dana.
Well, it's actually it's 180-page whole issue of the West Africa Review. It's an
Right.
article, but they're making it into a book, and they've been saying
Okay.
that for a while. But they got back in touch with me recently, and with different editings, and so they're really working on it now to make it into a hard copy book. But yeah, it's already online. It was published in 2014. 2014. Fear of Blackness, and it's in the West Africa Review Journal, and that is part of the Africa Resource where you talked about, where I used to be on, also talking a lot Rasta Livewire. But then he got a little disrespectful, so I left there. So anyway, yeah, no, I talked about how Shakespeare and I think it was another author in the same period talked about the Muslim Moroccan sultans being Moors and black, and the ones that they were talking about were those of actually slave women. So we know that, and they're actually shown as black, painted as black, or at least one of them was painted as black in J.A. Rogers' book. Okay, so we know when Shakespeare said black, he meant black. Okay, so these early Moroccan sultans, a lot of them actually, the what's the name? Some of the meaner ones actually, in fact, were black, definitely black. There's no reason to think Othello wasn't a black because he's described such, and that's basically, anybody that was described as black, um, as Moor in that time was usually, you know,
Of
black,
course,
black as a Moor. And even
of
Haydn,
course.
the reason Haydn was called Blackamoor was because he was dark as a Moor, you know, and Beethoven too was called Moor, not because he was Muslim, but because he was black as like a Moor.
No way. Okay, 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 okay. I
You didn't know that? You haven't seen pictures of Beethoven and as our color and his features too? They said that Beethoven would never have recognized himself if he came back here and saw how they're representing him. So Beethoven, Haydn, and then and I think it was Haydn that they said somebody who's being made fun of because he had an no, it might have been somebody else, but he even conducted his orchestras like an African. They said they made fun of him.
see. I've heard this before. But obviously the representation you get of Beethoven is of a white person. So you kind of think, oh, that must be extreme Afrocentrism. Let me just leave that to one side. But then,
Well,
as you say, there are actual historical accounts that describe this person that do not match with what we see portrayed now. Now, if
well,
you're a newbie, if you're new to this field, you might think, oh, that's a lot of rubbish. But after seeing again and again the distortions of history, it's not so surprising what you're saying, but it is at the same time still shocking.
and there is an early painting of him though, like I said, with dark brown skin. So dark brown near black skin.
I don't
But
even want to go into that rabbit hole right now because that will just we will lose ourselves in that. I want to ask you this, and it's linked to the Othello thing. Now in one of your addendum work I think it's a 2013 article, you said this: the slave pens of Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco at Meknes, Tripoli, were in fact described in some texts as crowded with Europeans, i.e., Christian slaves. And it appears that these pens were not infrequently raided by Tuareg and other Berbers, the
right,
latter carrying their prey back into the mountains as well as into the deserts and deep into the interior of Africa. Close
right.
quote. Is it true that this horrific enslaving and trading of whites by the Moors changed the demographics of North Africa? If so, how much so? And yeah, that's what I want to know.
Well, it's that, and as well as one of the translators of Leo Africanus stated, there were innumerable people or men that had turned Turk, meaning had converted to Islam and came into North Africa. Now, I think it was Ramzi Ruigi recently that showed that, or told of the 100,000 Andalusians that also came into North Africa after they were after the Muslims were kicked out. A lot of those Muslims retreated or came into North Africa, and a lot of the people were not, you know, dark skinned. They were regular Spanish looking people, or and sometimes mulatto. There were Syrians, people of Syrian descent, people of um, Central Asian and Slavic descent that came into Africa, you know, into North Africa. But that's why when you get away from the coasts, that's why supposedly everything away from the coast is the South in North African writings. They'll say, when you get away from Algeria, you go south, or you go to, like I said, there's oases in the central area where all these, Numidian towns are, and you only saw in the photos of the 19th century black people. That That's the South, supposedly. Okay. Um, so there's not, most of the Berber people probably are still dark in color. It's just that people in the North, they're so brainwashed to think that, anything European, anything, same thing in Egypt with a lot of, not the more educated ones, but the, the, the ones that are, nationalists and things of that sort, thinking that, African Americans are trying to take their history, and uh,
Mm-hmm.
well, most of the world now thinks that because some of us are out here saying some silly stuff, but the fact is, at the time of Strabo, the entire coast of North Africa, except probably parts of Libya, wasn't occupied by black people. That is just what the early Europeans said. They don't like it, then stop looking at history. That's
I
what they
bet they
said.
wish they could burn those books.
Well, there's still a chance. So I keep telling people they better start making copies of stuff I put online, because once this is lost, I'm not coming back.
Of course, of course.
Well, and I had just lost. I've been working on something on the Canaanites, and I lost the whole thing, like 20 pages. I had to do the whole thing over, but I mean, I've literally put photos of the entire Black Near Eastern or South Asian world from very early periods on my Facebook page and on my Afro-Asiatic Black Spot. I mean, I'm talking about the Masmuda, the Zanata, all the Berber peoples, all the Arab peoples that were called black, including the Quraysh, the Hudhail bin Khuzaima, bin Mudrika, who were uncles of Quraysh. Well, I didn't have pictures of them, but because a lot of these places have been taken over by, by God knows who they're from. So, for example, the Hijaz, if you go to Hijaz, you won't see black people much anymore. If you go to
Yeah.
Asir, south of that, you won't see black people. And the Tahama is even changing. Yemen has been changed. Different places
Mm-hmm.
that the colonialists described as being mainly black are changed. It's because of especially during the industrial era, people like Burkhardt and other colonialist orientalists said that there were the Hijaz was being flooded by foreigners. Asir was settled by Turks. You can see there. I put up photos of the Turks with their students in there, with their almost all students that were Turkish, except for a few Arabs. All the Arabs, of course, black or near black in color. These places have been demographically changed even recently, since
Mm.
since the colonial period. There's been
Mm.
since the industrial era in Egypt. When I was in Rutgers, there was a Syrian guy literally from Syria came into my class, and he was talking about the history of Egypt. He said there's been a whole wave of millions of Syrians came into Egypt, or millions of people from the Levant came into Egypt. Even during the industrial era. What happened to those people? Was he making something up? You know?
And they like to say that they like to say, oh, these things can't happen, that you can't change the whole demographics in such a short space of time. And I say, hello, Red Indians, sorry, Native Americans, please, anybody, you
Yeah.
know. How long did it take to almost wipe them almost off the face of the earth? But it's ridiculous.
And you can go to Medina too, and you won't see black people. Medina, which was described in the 19th century as mostly black. And not only
Mm.
that, they said that the people there were from the Ansar, that most of the people in Medina were from the Ansar. I hope everybody knows who the Ansar were. Those were the companion tribes of the Prophet of Islam.
Right, right,
Ansar
right.
from the original people of the Khazraj Aus I was talking about, Sulaim. Okay, and this is what actually I'm writing about in my I wrote it actually in the in what is it? The tints of Kedar. A problem with the tints of Kedar, talking about the recent, even the early and recent demographic changes that have occurred. That where people are not taking that into account. Okay? They're not taking into account who were the slaves of the central, who were being brought in by the tens of thousands into Central Arabia from Persia or from the Iranians. Okay, they're just not taking a lot of this into account.
Thank you, Doctor. Doctor, I want to ask you this, and I'll make this one sharp. Is there, this is a bit of a cheeky question, it's a bit of a dicey one. Was there, and so you've just told us about the slaving of the Moors, and you've told us that throughout the chat here and there as well. You told us how they would bring in these masses and masses of white European slaves. I've read some texts that suggest that the Moors had especially many of their leaders, their sultans and caliphs, they had a penchant, shall we say, for the white European woman. Was there sort of an erotic obsession with with white women that influenced the Moors slave trade? And I think people today call it, well, I'm not going to go there, but was that a thing? And did this obsession have an equivalent in Europe? Are there any famous Moors quotes absorbed into European history that we don't think of as Moors? You mentioned Beethoven earlier. I'm thinking of Princess Charlotte, maybe. Are there any others? So just it's a two-part two-headed question.
Well, the first part is that yes, there was a kind of um, eroticism going on because I've actually published something that another researcher, a woman, wrote, or she's actually, yeah, and she said that she cited certain quotes from the Arabs saying that, "Ooh, I can't wait! Oh, I can't wait to get to such and such a place because they weren't circumcised for one thing."
Right.
And they were considered, yeah, and that was considered very like that was considered the thing.
Yeah.
So and the children that were born, this is what I read. I've been trying to find where I read it so I can put the source in. But the children that were born to um, I have to say something about Queen Charlotte later because that's a different thing. But the children that were born to Arab men were often called sons of the clitoris, children of
Wow.
the clitoris. So the white, the white or non-Arab children, the non-Muslim children, because all early Christians, Jews, or I shouldn't say Christian Europeans, but the early Christians and the early Jews who became the Muslims actually were circumcised, like Africans that they were.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, that was a big part of their lust for. There was a big lust factor there.
Wow.
And also the women were came to be considered by the Circassian or the Ottoman era. The Circassian women came to be the most considered the most valuable and beautiful women of the they were Slavic, dark haired but Slavic women from east of Turkey. Um, so the Gurgiz area, places like that. So they were considered more expensive. They were more valuable to purchase, and that kind of thing. Just similar to well, and then the same thing happened in Morocco, where they were being brought up in um, women were being brought in from Europe and Circassia, places like that, up until the 20th century. For all I know, they're still being brought in, like they are in Arabia. But as far as Queen Charlotte, she belonged to a group of Germans that were themselves already, and so did the same aristocratic faction that Blavatsky came from. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. So she, if you look at her picture, you'll see her same kinky hair and stuff like that. So that group comes from the early German aristocratic group that came from the families that were from Portugal.
Hmm.
So a lot of the early, of course, the early Portuguese. royalty, even the ones that went down to Portugal, looked African. And that's
Mm.
why, the strain was still there. It was atavism that was coming up. You know,
Wow.
the ancestor of Prince Charles and all these other, not
Mm.
all, but Queen Elizabeth and other, direct ancestor of Queen Elizabeth. So and Queen Victoria.
Incredible, incredible. I know recently you've been looking into more into the black presence in Arabia, and you've told us here and there about that. Um, and even more surprisingly, you've spoken about the blackness of the original Jews. You have, I think, your most recent work is about that topic particularly. So you're saying to me and to people listening right now, and that will be listening later, that once upon a time, I'll be conservative here. Once upon a time, Jewishness or the Israelites had a strong black contingency. Is that what you're saying? And if so, what happened to dilute this out?
Well, no, I'm not saying they had a strong black contingency. I'm saying that the Jews, the Israelites, the people of Noah were black. Period. There were
Wow.
no, there were no. The same thing that happened. For example, listen, the writer Al Makdisi in his book wrote about the short. I think it was called the short history of the Copts. I think that was 1,000 years ago, or maybe 900 years ago. He wrote this the Copts, the Abyssinians, the Nubians, and the Israelites could not be distinguished from each other, and that they were at war socially with the Greek Christians called Melkites, Greek and Byzantine Christians called Melkites. He was actually, the writer, Al Makdisi, was, I think, Turkish or Kurdish, but of course he's writing in Arabic. He may have been a Mamluk. So he writes that these people were not getting along and were actually harassing and in such a violence that they were murdering each other. So there was distinct difference between the Copts or the indigenous Egyptians who looked like the Abyssinians and the Nubians and the Israelites. Okay, that's what he was saying.
Wow.
And the Israelites, that's because, like I said, the Banu Sulaim, tribes of Mansur, who are in even called Manasir today in Sudan and in Arabia and in Yemen. That tribe of Jacob, tribes of Jacob actually, were in Egypt as they were in Sudan. Most of the tribes in Sudan are descend from the same Arabs that came through Egypt, that were settled in Egypt. They did not have time. There was not intermixture with Africans that made them dark. They had always been described as dark. The Sulaim,
Described as dark by the sources.
yes, the Sulaim, for example, they lived in the Hara, the volcanic Hara, and that is why Ibn Jahiz in the 9th century, I think the 9th or 10th century, wrote that the Sulaim Ibn Mansur are black like the other tribes of the Hara. All the other tribes of the Hara, except they were taking slaves from the Ashban and from and their concubines from, I forget, Byzantines, I think it was. In any case, he said, no matter the case, within 3 children or 3 generations, the original color or complexion of the Banu Sulaim returned. So the Banu Sulaim and Hawazin bin Mansur, like I said, were the tribes in the desert surrounding Medina. Some of them became part of the Ansar groups. Um, they're also found in the tribes of Kinana and Sulaim, found in the Tahama and in the Jordan area, Transjordanian area known as the Gar. The people in the Gar, there's a lot of confusion about because during the Ottoman period, some of these places, or a lot of these places, also actually had African slaves coming in, just as there were Circassians coming in. But the problem is they try to say that all of the all of the dark-skinned Arabs, like the Canaana or Cananea, are also black due to, their being African slaves. Although they were described as black, of course, in the early Christian era. The Kuta were also Valley tribe that lived in Nubia, or in the eastern desert of Nubia and Egypt, were also described as blacks. Albanian were described as black. Okay, so the Kuta were the people who had groups among them called the Kalb, or biblical Caleb, the Saleh, or biblical Sheila, the Thor, or Shur, the Kunes, or Kenizzites. So all these groups were in the Bible are the early Judeans. Actually the names come and are the same or identical to the judges, the first judges of Israel. You also have the Banu Uzdra, who is Ezra of the Bible. All of these tribes were described as black. The Kuta actually derived from the Himyarites, according to most sources, from the Himyarites, or Humer, better known as Hamor in the Bible. Hamor was the king of Canaan. So the region of Canaan extended between Mecca, which was south of that was the plain of the Cananea, and you had the valley of Canaana, or the valley of the Canaanites, and you had the plain of Canaana. So extending down to near Yemen, or today's Yemen, and that was part of the Tehama. That is where these people lived. Major groups of them actually settled in Africa. So the Somalis, for example, also have the same names as these Hud, Hail, and Kara people. They're probably not indigenous people to the Horn. A lot of them came from, and same thing for the Beja. A lot of them came a lot earlier than the Arabs, to like 1,000 years earlier, because the Blemis go back to the 6th century BC or something of that sort. But they're in rabbinical texts, the Jewish rabbinical texts, European Jewish, I think. They're called the Bilam. And Bilam is a tribe which is also like actually plural for the Beli tribe. They're called Beli or Bila, and they extend down to the Asir area of Saudi Arabia today. And they are also, the plural is Balauna, or in the Gower or Transjordania, and in Africa, the plural is Balawi, and they make a large part of the Tigray people in Eritrea. So all these so-called Semitic peoples, we're talking about the worshippers of Yahweh. I forgot to mention the other major group of Kuda or Kunes was Al-Kain or Kane. And that was the group that, according to a lot of scholars, worshipped Yahweh and brought the worship of Yahweh to other parts of, the Arab world, or the early Arabia.
Wow.
And I was able to find out that they're called Kenites in the Bible. And that's why even the Cana, the word Cano, for example, in among the Hausa still means, I think it means blacksmith or ironsmith or something like that. So these groups were metallurgists. The Kenites were metallurgists and miners, and in charge of gold and silver. And that's why the early Jews in Africa, just like they became later in Europe, were in charge of mining and the trading and the excavation of jewelry. Sorry, of gold and silver and other, and even copper before that. That's where that comes from. So you find among the Tuareg that the Sunni groups among the Tuareg are those people that are the specialists in silver jewelry, and the Wangara were the gold traders and miners. So it's a very, complex. There were very complex connections, but these people apparently settled related to the Cain. These Cain in Arabic is Cain, meaning smith or metallurgist. It has to do with the birds making its nest with its beak. That's where it came from. All early Arab or Afro-Asiatic peoples were totemic peoples, so a lot of their names come from animals and the fauna around them. Who's
Doctor,
that?
what's the name of your book on this topic?
Um, wait, we talk about which topic? Oh,
On the
so
Arabs and Jews.
the the name of it is the African and Arabian origins of the Hebrew Bible. Now, I don't get into talking about the connection of these, the Songhai and stuff with the Arab Jews and stuff like that. But I do so in Fear of Blackness, which was the other one I
Okay.
told you about. Now, unfortunately, that one you have to subscribe to if you really want to, get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
About
Okay.
the Black Jews.
A lot. Sorry. Carry on, doctor.
Now, I talk about how originally the Black Jews the Jews in Africa were described black. I
Hmm.
mean, Arab writers say that
That
they
quote you used earlier, the quote about the Copts and the Moors, and sorry, the Ethiopians and the Abyssinians, or that quote was, I think I used it in a video myself a few months back, and I couldn't believe it when I came across it. I couldn't. Shout out to a friend of ours on the channel, the Debunker. He's usually with us. He sent me that quote, and that's an amazing quote. Doctor, can the Bible help us to piece together our heavily beset history, um, or is it just useless myth, as some people say?
know the Bible has to be learned by every African that
Mm,
considers himself of any African of the Guinea coast or any African Tuareg or Berber, meaning the men in the Nilo-Saharans and the Cushitic and Ethiopian peoples. Most of
incredible.
most of Africa needs to know the Bible because a lot of people actually even, of course, there's the Lemba further south that still are more Kahin Cohen in their genetics than the white Jews. Okay, the Lemba who claim to come from Sena and Hajimot, where there was a tribe of Dan, even today, the Bahila, or the descendants of Bahila called Haban, among whom they're trying to make into white people, but the early Haban are, of course, black and they look like the Falasha. They wear the side locks. Okay, they're much bigger people than other groups in Arabia that are tend to be gracile or life and build gracile Mediterranean types, meaning Somali type or Amhara, Beja type. The so-called small Mediterranean type was a basic population of Arabia, but there are other groups, and apparently some of the um, Jewish or Israelite tribes were different. So we have in the Horn of Africa, you have several groups that are called Hebrews or Jewish or formerly were Jewish supposedly, and if you look at them, they look more like West Africans than they do like the Amhara or Tigray and people like that. And I'm wondering how did that happen? And yet, when I think about it, those are the people possibly that could have headed west and adopted either the Nilo-Saharan dialects or actually, um, yeah, may have adopted the Nilo-Saharan dialects. They're called Huber or Ubir and Falasha, which is another name for the Philistine, ancient Philistine, Philais people of, or Falasa people of Yemen. All Israelite people were first found in Yemen. The Old Testament is mainly about the Yemen, and then they moved north after the 8th century, predominantly or mostly after the 8th century. That's where you find the same names of peoples, tribes, and places. Okay, I hope he comes back soon because I'm losing my voice. And I don't see comments.
I asked the Bible question because a lot of people in our community like to say that we don't need the Bible, it's the white man's book and everything. And here you are saying you're saying that actually we must get to grips with that book. There are things inside it that are crucial to understanding the Black past. I find that incredible. So guys, you heard that here first with Dr. Dana Manish. Doctor, have you faced any opposition in your work? Um, perhaps from I'm thinking now there are some what you're saying is pretty it shouldn't be, but it's controversial to the mainstream. Have you faced any sort of pushback because of like any posts not being available to you because of the study that you put out there, the work you put out there?
Actually, not really. Um,
Okay.
Especially in the, I was surprisingly in the most academically inclined communities. Like, I was even invited to an Oxford online conference back late last year, and when I put conferences on academia site, the academia site and other sites, I invite, you know, scholars. I want scholars to come on that are Western scholars, peer-reviewed people, so that they can review or make comment. And basically, a lot of people have either, well, the ones that have read the book, The African and Arabian Origin of the Hebrew Bible, have found it fascinating. They say the word I've gotten back from it, back from at least four of the top scholars. I'm not going to say their names, but they're the top scholars in linguistic archaeology in the Near East. I'll put it that way. And of Islamic and Judaic exegesis. Exegesis. So it's been, I don't have much pushback yet from
That's good. That's
people
good.
because they're reading my work and they know what I'm talking about.
Amen. Amen. Because it's hard to fight somebody who's um literally citing historical sources, archaeological data. It's incredible. So of course, there was one blog years back. when I was scouring the internet for information about you. I didn't really plumb the depths, but I came across Matilda's Anthropology. I've come across that blog. I think it's defunct, and I don't think the person posts there anymore. But quite a few years back, they were quite active, and I think she was trying to defame you and say that you were, just trying to put aspersions on your work. So I wonder if you've had someone like that, kind of stalking you around the place, still. But yeah, okay.
When I first came out, I think you might be talking about the Matilda site.
Yes, Matilda's Anthropology. Yeah, yeah.
I actually made the whole site about trying to refute me. Yeah. But the
Wow.
idea is, unfortunately, a lot of people are unfamiliar with the fact that, the sources do talk about it, explicitly talk about, deal with, the complexion of certain peoples and things. And
Mm.
there's only so much you can take if you're repeatedly being told that the five tribes of the Berbers are black skinned by, even, or that the Beja were, the Arabs are darker than the Abyssinians by Ibn Hakul, or that the Copts were black by Ibn Hatami, and that, yeah, I mean, almost all the Berber tribes were always described as black. The major
Hmm.
Berber tribes, Sanhaja, Masmuda, Gautama, Hawara, Zanata, those tribes are where came most of the tribes, and especially the tribes that invaded um, Iberia.
Mm,
And they were
mm.
across. They are, like I said, they are basically two people, or three people, I should say. The Gara or Gorin people, mainly, they're also the people that founded Garamantia. They are the Zagawa or Zagai people, Sugai is Suagan people, and they are the Tuareg. Those are the three people, because the Masmuda groups, the major Masmuda group is said to have been related to the people of the Berdoa or Tubu Gorain. Um, but the Masmuda, I mean, I put plenty of pictures of them up. Um, oh, did I answer your question? I forgot. I went
Yeah,
on.
no, no. You did. It wasn't. You did very well. It was very. I extended it myself. It's yeah. You did. Doctor, why did the Moors fall? We're coming to the end now. I just want to know this. Why did the Moors fall? They were a civilization of people who were dominant for like they were dominant over a vast area of a whole continent, and they spilled over into Europe. Why did they fall to the point where today we even have to debate what they looked like? What's your opinion?
Because, well, they didn't. They actually, their names have been absorbed by other peoples, and and they've also intermixed greatly with these people. But
Hmm.
the men that came down from um, Europe that were sent by the Tuareg dynasty called Almoravid into Africa to collect taxes were called, they were Christian European slaves. And the leader of the people that invaded them, the leader of the Muwahid, Muwahidin, or the Masmuda group that later invaded, said that the reason why the Masmuda were turning white, or some of their people were turning white, was that these groups were being sent, the European were sent into Morocco to collect taxes, and they were also taking advantage of the women because, you had to listen to the Almoravid um, soldiers. These were slave soldiers of Almoravid. That's literally what Ibn Tumart said. He wrote it. So I finally, and that's in a book about Sijil Massa, which was one of the Zenata Berber towns in Morocco near Fez. So yeah, all you have to do is look at what, and so, but not only that, in places like Meknes, as I was saying, that was founded by the Meknasi Berbers, which were also related. I think they were supposed to be Tuareg. And now the entire place of Meknes, because that's where the sultans were bringing in 20,000 European slaves, the whole area is filled with slaves. I mean, sorry, shouldn't say that. Filled with people that speak Berber but are descendants from Europeans largely. So that's what was happening all across the coast of North Africa. And some of these people were even brought, like I said, into Niger, and there's narratives that speak about it. That people from Europe were brought in, and they went back, actually. Some of them went back, escaped, and wrote about their time as slaves of the Berbers or slaves in Niger.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Well, it seems like it's the old
So
oh, there's an old adage in there somewhere.
it's just intermixing, because the Tuareg used to marry their slaves, and
Yeah.
there was different kind of slavery over in America than there was in Africa,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
sometimes the master in our world was poorer than his slave. The slave
Wow.
could make more money, be richer than his master. So
Interesting, interesting, interesting. Doctor, how do we fight the this is my last question to you today. We've been listening to Dr. Dana Reynolds-Marniche. There's a W there as well. There's a W middle name middle initial W. There's Dr. Dana W Reynolds-Marniche. how do we fight the artificial Mandela effect being forced on Black history and the history of the Moors? How do we fight this whitewashing of this history?
By learning uh, about being able to read the history. That's why I say we have
Mm,
to learn these languages. Hebrew is a Canaanite language. Arabic was from the Arabians. I'm talking about the Hijazis and these people that live between Jordan and Hijaz. They're black languages. You have to learn them, and we have to read about who the people were, how they were described. I mean, we know that Ibn Munzir, the writer of Lisan al-Arab, said that, for example, certain terms that were being used for black people are now used for, you know, for fairer skinned people. Like, for example, Abiyad or Biad was used for the white people, or people like me, people like the Abyssinians. It was used in poetry for people like Abyssinia, in Arabic poetry, in classical Arabic poetry. But later on, now, when people use the words Asmar or Abiyad in some place like Lebanon or Syria or wherever, that could mean something completely different. So when people interpreted these texts and they say, though, the Berbers of the Antares tribe were described as white, no, they weren't. They were described as Biad, which means somebody of a clear wheatish brown, meaning actually dark wheat, black buckwheat, it was called. Black buckwheat complexion that was clear. Okay, the Tuareg today are not even reflective of the ancient Tuareg because they're mixed a lot with the Europeans. Most of the Tuareg are still dark and brown. The the E haplotype that is supposed to be the Berber haplotype reaches its highest frequency among the Tuareg of places like Burkina Faso, where they're mostly black people. So I hope that answers most of your
it
questions.
does. It does. It does. So it's a thing. It's it's talking like we're talking now, but it's also getting educated and actually learning these languages. I don't know whether I've got the time on my hands, but it's something that I think by osmosis, the more you study, you can pick up. I've been reading a lot of Arabic sources, looking into the Moors, and what I find is just the little interaction I have with the language through the study I'm doing, I'm picking up words and phrases that I know myself. So even just studying like we're doing right now is doing a lot
Right,
to keep these languages alive. And I love what your point you made it a couple of times now about how Arabic is actually an African language. So a lot of these languages we think of as foreign to us are actually African language. They add the Asiatic at the end, but really when you look at the roots of these languages, they're Afro-Asiatic, and a lot of anthropologists and linguists agree that they originate within Africa proper. So that's a brilliant point. That's an absolutely magnificent point. We don't need to look at these languages like they're foreign to us. Actually, they are ours. And they
right.
even sound African. There's something African that sounds. There's something African to the Arabic language. I can't really explain what
Right.
I'm talking about, but yeah.
Yeah, because it was originally called Afro San by Christopher Everett, as you may know.
Mm,
Um,
right.
because, because the language was actually thought to be related to the San, the so-called Bushman San dialects. And most Semitic dialects are found in Ethiopia, not in Asia, but Ethiopia. So yeah, it was a movement, and they know that the Afro-Asiatic culture, the Neolithic culture, is what spawned a lot of these words. Words related to agriculture and pastoralism. So there's no question that these were Afro-Asiatic languages and that they've been adopted, in various times by people of Afro-Asiatic or non-African origin. So we have
Mm,
to learn
mm,
that. We have make sure we're reading the right books. Join my course. I wish I'd
Yes,
read
I want to
it.
say that. Please let my viewers know just quickly where they can find you, and what current works you want them to be getting putting in their library. So where can my listeners and my viewers find you, Doctor?
I'm now on Facebook when I'm on Facebook, which is the one I gave you, which is Dana Reynolds-Marniche, and the parentheses African Arc. And then of course I have my blogspot, the Afroasiatics blogspot. Now the books that I'm talking about, the academic books, are pretty expensive. So for example, the African and Arabian origins of the Hebrew Bible is being sold. It was on Amazon, but my publisher took it off because he said it was being. They went ahead to put it on. What's it called? That it's a publishing group associated with Amazon, but they want him to pay more for it, so he took it off there. But you can still find it on his site, which is the Edwin Mellon Press,
Okay.
EDWIN and Mellon, and you just put in my name and the link is there.
Okay.
And that one, and you go on to Fear of Blackness is also, you have to subscribe for, I
Fear
think,
of Blackness sounds like a sounds like a powerful read. I will say that right now.
yeah, that's the one that's being made into a book um, that I can't, unfortunately, cannot give away. And um, yeah, I most of the work that I've been putting on the academic sites, I also try to put on the Afroasiatics blog spot. So, like right now, the last one I put up was um, a problem with the tints of Kedar. And it's supposed to be tents, of course, the tents of Kedar, but I changed the word to tints because there's a big problem in the Near East with the fact that, these early people were basically African, dark skinned African looking people. And they want to, try to make them all into non non authentic Arabs.
Of
When in
course.
fact the genuine, the name for the N word
Yeah.
take name in Arabia is Kuderi. They call Kuder, which, like I said, is actually the name Kedar,
Mm.
the first son of Ishmael. So the Kedarites and Ishmaelites were the same people. Those are the northern Arabs, actually, while the Khatan or Joktan were the southern Arabs. Anyway, that name used to mean genuine or pure Arab, and also meant the black Arab, because the black Arabs are considered the pure Arabs. Nowadays, it means the black, but it also means it's a derogatory word to say Kuderi. So people that are like Bangladeshis and other people that now they're being called Kuderi, they have like this black power movement. So the movement of the Kuderi. But that name is still used for the tribes of Ishmaelite tribes in the north part of Central Arabia. They're still called by their original early names, including I think Hadad is one of them, or Hadar, and Tama, Massa. There's different names of of all the Ishmaelite tribes. They fall under the category of the Rabia Arabs, who were originally called Amorites, the Rabian Amorites that lived between um, Mesopotamia and the northern part of Central Arabia. So the Rabia, like I told you, were the tribes that I found, that colonized Turkey, and they were called the Arapi, and colonized Jordan as well. And Deir Mudar, the whole area of northern Mesopotamia, became occupied by these Arapi, or Arabian Arabs. So what's important is that I think I put that picture of the Arab tribes with the Germans in Turkey the Arab tribe of the Germans in Turkey, on Facebook, and I think I just recently put it on my blog spot. But almost all I have hundreds of photos on Facebook that I put up, and I've seen. I think some of them are super importance. So they should definitely go to my Facebook and look at the photo albums.
Doctor.
Yeah,
So no, sorry. So I was just gonna say, Doctor Dr. Dana's Facebook is just her name, Dr. Dana Marniche, Reynolds-Marniche. Find her on there. Find her on um Afro Asiatics blogspot .com
yeah.
and
Blogspot.
sorry, dog
And
blogspot
there's an
dog blogspot.com. Sorry about that. I will post at the in the description at the bottom of this video. I'll post all the relevant links to her resources and her where you can catch up with her, her YouTube and Facebook and all those other avenues as well. This
uh,
has been. Go on.
I,
Sorry. Go on.
I didn't know because you didn't mention. I didn't know if you were familiar with Golden Age of the Moor, which was my first. Um, under
Golden Age of the Moor. Golden Age of the Moor.
under Dr. Van Sertima. So my first article is where I first started talking about the Moors being their ethnic history, and this
Mm,
became actually the inspirer for a lot of early folk that got interested in the Berber history. And I had this time I had to try to convince people that the Berbers were black and that all of them were black, and that the earliest Libyans were black because people were arguing with me back then. Then they started to argue with me about the Arabs being black. So basically, I've had to, I've been challenged mainly by other black people about this
mm.
stuff, and the neo Nazis, the two things, the neo
Yeah,
Nazis.
I mean, I could have been one of those black people many a moons ago because the ignorance is it's forced upon us, and we don't know what we don't know. But I hope a lot of people watch this back. I hope this stream, please, guys, share this far and wide, and share Dr. Dana's work far and wide as well. It's been a long stream. It's been an amazing stream. We had some problems at the beginning. It's almost becoming a thing now with our streams. Like there has to be some kind of a problem at the beginning, but once they get going, they are actually amazing. This has been an amazing conversation with Dr. Dana Reynolds-Marniche. Guys, we've gone from North Africa. We've done we've done the Sahel. We've done the Arabian Peninsula. We've gone to Syria. We've come back to Africa. This has been. You need to watch this back. If you missed any part of it, I see you, King. The King's monologue. Honor to whom honor is due. He's in the chat. He's joined us late, but King, I recommend that you watch this back. That's another great creator, a brother in arms on the YouTube space, the King's Monologue. Doctor, if you want to link up with him, that'd be great too. But thank you so much, Doctor, for joining us. Please hang on. I just want to say thank you. Look, guys, everyone who's joined me, it's been brilliant. Thank you so much. I've kept abreast of your comments as well. Some of them were great. Some of them were not so great. We had one or two trolls, but whatever. We'll just ignore them. They make things spicy, so that's good.
Yeah, that's true.
We are Black Gone Global, all the way from Kush to Compton, guys. It's been wonderful. This has been Trill Black, no doubt. I'll see you guys in the next one, okay?
Bye,
Peace.
everybody, and thank you.